Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. Merry Christmas Day from Forbidden Planet TV. This is a very special edition of Forbidden Planet, a seasonal, festive Christmas Day special edition that I was originally going to call Dave Gibbons' Christmas Day Message. But I think I'll call Christmas Day with Dave Gibbons. And here he is. How are you, Dave?
I'm good. In fact, if you wanted to, Andrew, you could call it Christmas Dave, couldn't you?
Oh, man. Oh, yeah. Do you know what? I think you might find it's Christmas Dave Gibbons might be somewhat close to the actual title. Yeah,
and I've got my Christmas jumper on, so I'm feeling very festive.
Well, I'm very envious of that Christmas jumper. So I'm going to try on my Santa hat. I've got a very large head, so let's see how this works. Oh yeah, okay, that's not so bad. That's it. That's the one.
I'd look really stupid if I wore that.
Yeah,
but you somehow just carry it off.
You're very kind. You're very kind. The last time I wore a hat that was anything like this was in Moscow, and it's a whole other story. I got arrested by 4 Red Guards outside of Lenin's tomb and taken round the back and robbed. And it was, I'm not kidding, the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. And so it was far from festive in the end.
So was it the fact you were wearing that hat that made them take you to one side, or was that just a coincidence?
At first I wondered, but this is a long time ago. It was back in my Loaded days and we were launching Loaded Russia. But right. I think what it was is I was taking photos of a bunch of old communists, like 8-year-old communists who were protesting with the communist iconography just outside of the Kremlin. And I think the fact that I took a photo of them was my undoing, not the fact that I was wearing the Santa hat.
That's what you get for being a journalist.
Correct. Who would be one? Who would be one? Yeah, but anyway, yeah, so not the right way, not the best way to spend Christmas time, with a bunch of Red Guards pointing loaded guns at your face. I have to say,
I'm glad you ended up at Titan Forbidden Planet rather than the Gulag, although some days I know there isn't a lot of difference.
you don't know the half of it, brother. Merry Christmas to you, Dave.
Merry Christmas to you too, Andrew. I've really missed not having our regular Christmas get together these past couple of years, but I hope it's I hope it's an event that we're going to reinstate when circumstances permit.
Me too, brother, and we absolutely will. We absolutely will. That's for sure. You know, I mean, fingers crossed. As soon as we're the other side of the ongoing COVID catastrophe, I will look forward to that very much, mate.
Great.
So, it being Christmas Day and all, you and I were reminiscing the other day about some of the great Christmas comics experiences of our past, of which there were many actually, because Christmas was always a huge motif, particularly within the British comics publishing era. Dave, when can you first remember being struck by Christmas comics, Christmas annuals?
Well, you know, I think there always has been a connection between Christmas and comics for me. There's something about the iconography of it, the sort of graphic nature of Christmas, the bright colors and everything that fits really well with comics. And I can remember being very young and getting almost nursery comics that would always have the traditional snow on the logo. And I used to marvel at that, you know, that they'd actually taken the trouble to draw or paint snow on the logo, or they'd have holly all around the edge of the page. The eagle in particular, I remember I used to be thrilled when that front page would be festooned with decorations and snow. And they would also kind of work it into the story as well. They'd always, in an ongoing serial, sort of take a little bit of time out to show the characters celebrating Christmas. And I remember in one Christmas edition of The Eagle, they kind of got all the characters in the same story. So you had Dan Dare and Jeff Arnold and the schoolboys and all that, all in one story. And that was like a precursor of the kind of team ups that would enthrall me so much later. So there was always something magical about comics at Christmas, where, you know, they expanded the usual world or the usual experience of the characters and gave you something special. It was almost like a glimpse behind the scene or something like that.
I completely agree. It was like breaking the fourth wall, wasn't it? Where everybody almost walked between the panels, the characters in the anthology titles we grew up with, and they'd all hang out together for a change.
Yeah. And of course, so you get the special Christmas edition of the comic, but also, of course, you get the Christmas annuals. And the Eagle used to have wonderful Christmas annuals that were every bit as exciting as the comic. You know, you get a brand new complete Dan Dare adventure. You get a lot of text as well, which people probably didn't bother to read. But you know, it was always a special treat. It was always stepping beyond the bounds of the regular weekly comic. And of course, the other thing that you used to get a Christmas annual for was Superman. And I think maybe the first time I ever encountered Superman was in a Christmas annual. My grandparents in particular knew that I loved to read. So one or other of them every Christmas would buy me a Superman annual or a Batman annual or a Beano annual. So, you know, there were always lots of them around the place. But I was quite a canny comic consumer even back then. And what I eventually ended up doing, much though I wanted to have the comic annuals on Christmas Day, I realized that if you didn't have the annuals until later in January, that all the newsagents would be selling the annuals off half price because they couldn't shift them after Christmas. So I actually asked my aunts and uncles to send me the money instead. And I'd wait and I'd try and get through Christmas, kind of doing cold turkey on comics. And then in mid-January, when the prices dropped, I'd splurge and I'd get twice as many comic annuals for my money as I otherwise would have done. So, you know, it was a whole operation to me, really, the Christmas annual.
Yeah, I think that was a very smart way to approach it. And just to digress for a second, for those of you who are watching Forbidden Planet TV from outside of the UK, just to give a bit of context for British Christmas annuals, they are, as Dave said, they are indeed some Christmas deference for you, though, mate.
Thank you. That time.
Yeah, of course. They are an institution of British publishing, and essentially, British publishing, comics publishing for many decades was made up of weekly anthology titles, and every Christmas, and I'm talking about around about October, November, the Christmas annual, cover dated with the following year, would appear. And it's essentially an A4 hardbound, about 150, 160 page version of the anthology, where you get special Christmas and New Year themed strips and extra added value stuff, like Dave said, the text pieces and whatnot. But you'd get them not just for comics, but you get them for popular TV shows. There's a very famous kids show in the UK called Blue Peter, a TV magazine program for kids. It still runs to this day, and they had a very famous annual. A lot of kids got the Blue Peter annual every year, and then you'd have them for TV shows as well. So you'd have Star Trek annuals, and in later years you'd have Star Wars annuals.
And of course they were hugely successful because they were at a price point which was the perfect amount to spend on your nephew or something for a Christmas present. They were books as well. I mean, as you say, they were hardbound books, so they look quite classy. And of course, for the publishers, they were relatively easy to produce because they would either reprint stuff which had appeared years before, or if they were buying in stuff from overseas, it would just be a way of getting more money for the stuff that they were buying anyway. So they were a huge and popular institution, and there were literally dozens of them available. There were other things as well that actually didn't have comics of their own, but they would have a special Christmas comic. I particularly remember Buffalo Bill, the Western character, and I used to love those annuals. They were drawn by a guy called Dennis McLaughlin, and they were wonderful things with cowboy adventures, but with Native American sort of kind of magic stories in them as well. And they were just the most wonderfully researched and most graphically exciting things. So, yeah, I mean, I can't dissociate comics from Christmas, and a lot of my regard for design and graphic treatment of stuff comes from those really quite lavish Christmas annuals. We might get to this later, but as I mentioned, the Superman annuals were, at one point, my favorite thing of all my favorite way to read comics. And I knew that I would always have one for Christmas. And with those, I couldn't wait until the middle of February because I don't think they printed as many of them. If you didn't get it for Christmas.
They were difficult to find, weren't they?
Yeah. So I always used to make sure I'd got one of those for Christmas. Fortunately, my maternal grandfather worked in a newsagent shop, so he could always get his hands on things that I particularly wanted, which was brilliant. And I remember that my mum and dad used to do this thing to help contain us kids' excitement on Christmas Eve, to say, okay, you can have one of your presents now, but you're not getting the rest till tomorrow. So of course, the one I would always ask for was the Superman annual,
Yeah.
which meant I could then also start reading it, which meant I could stay up a bit later. And who knows, maybe they might have weakened and let me have another present. So I've got memories of Christmas Eve, waiting for Christmas, sat there in my dressing gown and my pajamas, starting to read a Superman annual. And indeed, talking of books, which we always are, I've been working on my autobiography, and I've been going through my old drawings and sketches and stuff I did when I was a kid. And I've come across the very first drawing of Superman that I did, that I've ever found. And it was actually dated Boxing Day, 1957, which is such a long time ago, I don't even like to think about it. But it's my drawing of Superman, obviously copied. That good old thick-waisted 1950s Superman flying over a very crudely drawn city, and it says Superman, and then in brackets, alias Clark Kent. So I immediately gave the game away there. And then I remember on a later Christmas, as a present, I had a device called a pantograph. And a pantograph is a simple mechanical armature, which means that you can trace a picture, but you can draw it bigger. So you go around the image with a pointer, and the pencil draws the whole thing, but bigger.
I remember those. Yeah.
And then I used to do that. I used to get a drawing of Superman and trace it, and then I'd get that tracing and double the size of it, and then I'd get that double size one and do another one, until I ended up on a roll of wallpaper with a 6 foot tall Superman. So, I was, even as a kid, I was kind of looking into the technological aspects of drawing comics. So, well, anyway, as you can tell, even to talk about Christmas and comics opens all these kinds of memories and avenues. And so it's an inextricable part of my comics world, I think.
I love that it's a doorway into another aspect of your comics development as well. That was fascinating to hear. I guess sometime after you had that Superman experience, I think for me as a little kid in the mid-60s, the other thing was comic books, because of them being used as ballast in returning ships into the port, were quite plentiful in Liverpool. American comic books, unlike a lot of British cities. But the other aspect of annuals I think is tremendously exciting is if you're into superheroes, if you're into Batman and Superman, and then at a certain point into the Marvel characters, the annuals are one of the few ways you could be guaranteed to pick up adventures and comic strips featuring those characters. And I remember there was a sequence of annuals that were published while the Batman TV show was on, one of which I've still got to this day, which featured a schematic of the Batcave inside, and a bunch of kind of, when you read them now, really quite off-brand tech stories that don't really bear any resemblance to the real Batman and Robin. But it was literally, it's like being trapped in a desert and finding an oasis. And I can remember, no doubt, like you did with your Superman annual, just reading and rereading and rereading that for years, not just weeks.
Oh yeah, and they would be a thing you would treasure, and because they were books, you could put them on a shelf. And also, if you went to jumble sales, which were the precursors of car boot sales, quite often kids would be selling their old Christmas annuals, so you could get some really good finds. I mean, I've got more or less a complete set of Eagle annuals, quite a few of which I picked up, in somewhat damaged condition at a jumble sale. So, you could always complete your individual collection of that version, So, and I also remember one Christmas, I got a book called I Flew with Braddock, which was a character, he was Flight Lieutenant Braddock or whatever, who flew a Lancaster bomber in World War II.
Bomber Braddock.
Bomber Braddock. And this was a hardcover book, a text story with just spot illustrations in it. And one of my relations bought me that for Christmas. And I remember on Christmas Day reading the whole thing from cover to cover. And then it was so good that on Boxing Day, I sat behind the sofa and read the whole thing again from cover to cover. Because as you say, you know, entertainment was not as plentiful in those days. And obviously in those days for me was even earlier than it was for you. So you'd find something that really got your interest like that, and you'd just devour it. You know, it was again, to continue the Christmas analogy, it was like stuffing your face at Christmas dinner. It was, oh, look at this big comic, I'm going to read the whole thing, then I'm going to read it again. You know, it was that feeling of plenty. You know.
Yeah, yeah. For sure. It was tremendously exciting, and I guess another classic British annual for me that I remember is, do you remember the IPC Fleetway comic Whizzer and Chips?
I do. I do.
So the essential, for those who are not familiar with that, the essential conceit of Whizzer and Chips, it was that it was two anthology comics in one each week. Whizzer and Chips with a different set of characters who were essentially, the narrative of the comic was they were at odds with each other. So the kind of cover character for Whizzer, if I remember correctly, was Sid Snake, and the cover character, the lead cover character for Chips was Shiner, who was a kid who wanted to be a boxer, who was always getting a black eye.
Right.
Yeah, and they were at war with each other and used to kind of, you know, sneak into each other's strips and whatnot. And there was an adventure strip that ran in Whizzer and Chips called The Perils of the Puzzler. And I don't know if you remember this, Dave, but the conceit of that strip was a criminal has somehow managed to get a young family of kids. I might be off on the details here, but this is the base. This is the concept of it. Has managed to get their father wrongly imprisoned, and he's sent them an identikit picture of his face, and the idea is that if they correctly solve his puzzles, they're able to put in a different piece of his face to figure out who he is. And this strip ran for about a year. Ultimately ends up in figuring out who he is and then getting him imprisoned. And then there was another strip called Revenge of the Puzzler, where I think he breaks out of prison or something like that. But in the Whizzer and Chips annual 1973, which came out in Christmas 72. So it was out in 73, but Christmas 72. The puzzler had been imprisoned, and there was a special Christmas story where he breaks out of prison and terrorizes them in their local village. And before he breaks out, you see them enjoying Christmas Day in their local village. And I grew up in Liverpool on the northern coast, where, because of the geographical location of the city, it doesn't really snow that much. And I just became, more than anything, completely obsessed with these Garden of England little village snowscapes that were in the script. Like, this was the perfect place, apart from the supervillain trying to kill them, this was the perfect place to enjoy Christmas. And I must have gone back and looked at that one strip thousands of times when I was a little kid. It was a window into a Christmas I really wanted.
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember Whizzer and Chips well. I think indeed some of my early money-making comic ventures were doing balloon lettering for comics like Whizzer and Chips.
Yeah.
Also, as a complete point of trivia, we got a couple of cats from a rescue centre, and we said, oh, you know, we'd really like those two cats there. And the woman said, oh, Whizzer and Chips, because they just named these cats after comics. So there was a Beano in there and a Dandy, but we happened to choose Whizzer and Chips, which is about as trivial a bit of comics info as you could get, I'm sure. But of course, with me as well, you know, when I came to the point that I ended up starting to draw comics professionally, a lot of my earliest stuff did appear in those Christmas annuals. I mean, I ended up doing covers for the British editions of Superman Annual and Batman and Super Adventure and all the various permutations they used to do, and doing artwork for crossword puzzle clues or kind of mazes and things, you know, this real bread and butter kind of comic book illustration stuff. But it was quite a thrill just to be in the Superman Annual, you know.
That must have been amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, you didn't get paid very much for it, but the other good thing about it was there wasn't a huge deadline pressure, because obviously they had a year to produce this annual, and so, you know, even when I stopped receiving them from my aunts and uncles at Christmas, they were still a big thing to me, you know.
Yeah, right on. I mean, of course, and their power lives on, right? You know, their power lives on throughout. It's amazing how these pieces of childhood trivia and
Mhm.
those early days of your career just absolutely have their echoes throughout what your career became.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, also I was thinking when I knew that we were going to do this chat, um, what hand I'd had in actually creating things for Christmas, because as I say, it's got this kind of magic, and I can certainly think of two things that I did that are directly related to Christmas. The first of them was a Hellblazer story. I was going to draw it, and I believe Warren Ellis was going to write it, but then he had some kind of falling out with DC, and they said to me, "Okay, so you're still in place to draw it. Would you like to write it as well?" And it's going to be a text story. And I thought, oh, that sounds an interesting thing to do, because it's a kind of format of it all of its own, the illustrated text story. So I thought, yeah, I could do that. Um, and I thought about it a little bit, and I thought, the way I want to approach this is the way that a British cartoonist called Carl Giles used to draw Christmas and winter. And
Yeah,
his political, well, not political cartoons, they were newspaper cartoons.
it's the Daily
Half,
Express, right, mate? Is that
yeah,
right?
half a page in the Daily Express, huge, wonderfully detailed illustrations. And he would come into his own in the wintertime, because not only did he draw wonderfully funny characters, but he was a master of the British landscape, and the British urban landscape in particular. And he would do this thing where a lot of the picture would be just left as blank space, just white space with nothing on it at all. And just the little areas of shadow and dark spotted about it that just brought the whole thing to life quite magically. And it was almost like one of those faintly abstract Japanese woodblock prints. It had a simplicity to it. And I thought, when I do my Hellblazer story, I can use that. I mean, it's also rather good, because if you compose it properly, obviously you just leave blank space. So it's quite an economic way to work. As long as you put the drawing in the right places that it makes sense, it's a fairly, good deal. So I had a little think about it, and I wasn't that familiar with Hellblazer, to be honest. In fact, I never read a Hellblazer comic. So I did a bit of research and read some Hellblazer comics, and I thought, I know what, I'm going to call it Another Bloody Christmas, because that's sort of, that people go, oh, it's another bloody Christmas, and it fits in with the whole slightly, violent and blood spattered story of Hellblazer. So I remember, and I had it was almost like I was given a gift with this story, because I sat down one Saturday morning. I thought, now I wonder what this is going to look like. I wonder how much space I've got. I wonder how many words it's going to be. And I sat down at the computer and opened up Adobe Illustrator, which is a kind of page design program. And I sort of typed in a suitable font, Another Bloody Christmas. And I sketched in a bit of artwork. And I thought, yeah, I wonder how this is going to look with some body copy. So I started to type the story as far as I'd figured it out. And usually when I write stories, I plan the whole thing out. I've got all the beats. This, I just had a vague idea of what it was going to be about. And I started typing, and I realized that I wasn't just typing for the sake of designing the page, but I was actually writing the story. So I carried on typing and typing and typing. And a couple of hours later, I'd come to the end of the story. I didn't know how I was going to pay the story off. But when I got to it, I immediately had the ending of it. It was quite a magical thing, a really unusual experience. And I read it through and thought, oh God, I'm supposed to be going to get the shopping, not sat here fiddling about on the computer. Went and got the shopping, came back, read it. It was great. I was so happy with it. Sent it off. Didn't hear from editorial at DC. The days went by. I thought, oh my God, this is why it was so easy to do, because I'm not doing it properly, and they haven't got the nerve to phone me up and tell me that they're not going to use it. But then on the following Friday, the group editor, the editor of the book, and somebody else from DC all phoned me up to go, it's brilliant, Dave. It's a fantastic story, one of the best we've ever read. You've absolutely nailed the character. So that was a Christmas gift. And then the other thing that I did as a Christmas special was for a DC book, a bit like those Marvel books that I know you love so much. It was a DC book called Christmas with the Superheroes.
I remember this. Yeah.
Yeah, and they said, "Do you want to do a story for that?" And I said, "Yeah, which character?" They said, "Well, any character you like." And I thought, who is a Christmas character in their name alone is Robin, of Batman and Robin, the Boy Wonder fame. And I thought it could be a Robin story. I thought, but Robin's a bit of a naff character, really. He's all right as a sidekick, and I thought about it. And I thought, no, I know what it is. It's a story about the Batcave. And I came up with this story about a wounded Robin getting lost in the Batcave, flying into the Batcave and getting lost, and then eventually being protected by the bat, one of the bats, the king bat that lived in the Batcave, from further harm and released to the wild. And I thought, yeah, there's a parallel here with Batman taking Robin under his wing, pun intended. And it was sort of how Batman's life was brightened up by Robin, and then Robin went again, and his life became rather dark and everything. And if I say it myself, it was a bit angsty and a bit emotional, but it wasn't a bad story. And it ended up being drawn by an artist called Gray Morrow,
the great Gray Morrow.
Fantastic, and he gave it loads of atmosphere, and he did some really good Bat art and Robin art, and it was it was rather a special story because it was a bit left field, and it took a character, and I think, if I say it myself, did something with it that I don't think has quite been done before. So again, I mean, just another nice Christmas association with comics for me.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of both of those strips and love both of them actually as they came out, and I think what a great treat to work with Gray Morrow as well.
Oh yeah, I mean he's one of those kind of artists that you would see a lot of when you were a kid. He never works on anything consistently, but his work did have that illustrative, textural kind of quality to it. And I think that's why he worked really well on a story like that, because he was one of that school of artists who never quite got superheroes, who couldn't do the abstract thing of superheroes wear clothes without wrinkles or creases in them. He would always draw those things, which to a superhero fan looks a bit clunky, but to a lover of illustration is a perfectly sensible and rational and very good thing to do, So yeah, he was somebody that I never thought I would work with. And he's got all those associations to other comics I love from the 50s and EC and the Warren magazines and everything like that. So yeah, it was just another good Christmas gift.
I think that's very well said, Dave. And something you touched upon briefly there was my love for the Marvel the outsized Marvel Treasury editions from the early 70s. And I've got two particular favourites. They did the Marvel Holiday Grab Bag editions. So so there's one, I think, this is through the prism of memory, and I haven't looked at them for a long time, even though I've got them. There was one I think came out about 74, and the cover illustration is either, because these things are almost A3 size, they might actually be A3 size. The cover illustration is either Buscema or Romita, and it's the main Avengers coming at you through kind of a holly wreath. But what was great was the back cover was the same shot from behind. Yeah, right. So if you flip to the back cover, you see just the the backs of all of those same heroes. But the one that really stuck in my memory was the year after, where you get a bunch of characters. Again, I think it was Romita, it might be a Buscema cover, and it's a bunch of characters around a Christmas tree, and so it's the Hulk, it's Doctor Strange, it's Luke Cage, and it's Nick Fury. And inside was probably my favourite Christmas comic strip ever, which is actually a reprint of Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. issue 10, which was just as Steranko had stopped working on the strip. It was written by Gary Friedrich and it was drawn by Frank Springer. And it's called 'Twas the Night, and it might be called 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. And it's basically... Fury gets back to his beautifully appointed New York penthouse apartment, which is very Steranko-esque in its design, but he gets inside and he puts on Frank Sinatra singing "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." An old girlfriend who's not the contestant, who's not Val, appears. She's been waiting for him. They start canoodling, but then Hydra launch some mass attack, so he has to nip out and sort that out. All of which he manages to do just as it's this is Christmas Eve, just as it's daybreak. He gets back to the apartment, has an embrace, has another listen to Sinatra as the sun is coming up over New York City. And I just remember being so taken with that story, so taken with Frank Springer's take on Steranko's design, and desperately wishing I could live in that penthouse apartment with that view of Manhattan.
Yeah, it's completely aspirational, isn't it? That's at this point, that's who I want to be.
That's the life I want. I want to be Nick Fury. Absolutely.
But you're right about Frank Springer. Frank Springer is an amazing artist, and I was looking through some stuff the other day, and he drew a book called The Adventures of Phoebe Zeitgeist. I don't know if you've ever seen that, where he's got this most wonderful classic comic book drawing style, and a kind of it's so polished, but what he's drawing is so ridiculous that it's a really, really powerful thing. And I mean, I think that's a perfect springboard for a story. You know, Nick Fury trying to have a nice Christmas, and he has to fight off Hydra before he can get back to the woman, and he can get back to the drink and the fun, which is great. But I also used to love, a lot of them I only encountered in reprint, but the Spirit Christmas stories.
About the Christmas Spirit, amazing.
Yeah. And again, because it's got that same kind of graphic kind of sensibility to it, then Father Christmas, Santa Claus, you know, has got that costume which we all know, that's full of color and is so iconic, that the two just seem to work together wonderfully.
And actually, what I love about the concept of the Christmas Spirit, which Eisner started doing annually on the edition closest to Christmas Eve each year. Essentially, the conceit of those tales is that it's Christmas time. The Spirit and Ebony, or the Spirit and Sammy, are inside Wildwood Cemetery, and the Spirit refuses to engage with the crime fighting because he leaves that to the Christmas Spirit at that time of year. But they're wonderful, as they always were. O. Henry-esque tales. They all go. There was a collection of them, which is I'm sure what you're referring to, a couple of years ago. Can't remember who collected it, but it's a lovely edition which just puts them all together in one book. But I mean, really indelible.
If I'd seen that stuff when I was 8-9 years old, it would have blown my mind, you know. But yeah, I mean, there has been some fantastic stuff there, definitely.
David, it's really made me think. There is a post that I created a few years ago, inspired by the Christmas Spirit, and I have got a Christmas music playlist called The Christmas Spirit, which I'll send to you, which each year I update with. I'm just about to, I've done for Christmas Day, the Christmas Spirit of 2021. So I'll send it to you, mate, because I've always loved those stories, and I've always loved Eisner's take on Christmas, which is essentially it's a period of time every year where people step away from the day-to-day battles with each other and choose to do randomly nice things for people. And of course that doesn't always happen, but I love the ethos of that. That's what Christmas was to him, a Jewish American, a time to try and be better, which I wholeheartedly believe in.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I think that spirit of Christmas, that sense of benevolence and compassion and love for your fellow man, is not a strictly Christian thing anyway, you know.
No,
I mean, I think the spirit, the sensibility behind it is a wonderful thing, and I suppose it comes back to things like, you know, in World War One, you know, the Tommies and the Germans playing football, you know. It's just, let's just stop it, let's just for one day, let's be what we could be, you know, and see what that feels like. So there's always that thing, I think, that goes to the heart of the human condition. And I think talks about the sort of noblest things that humans do. And I mean, you listen to something like that song, I Wish It Could Be Christmas every day. It would be nice if people could behave with the same compassion and generosity every day of the year, wouldn't it? But
Dave,
maybe
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I think that's very well said.
I
And
think I'm waxing very philosophical now, and it usually takes me a few drinks to get to this point. So I'm obviously intoxicated with the heady fumes of comic Christmases past.
exactly, it's that pre-Christmas dinner moment
Yeah.
of philosophy retrospection,
Yes.
which is tremendously, it's a key part of the season. I also think it's a great point at which to close out on. So Dave, thanks so much for joining me here, and for the views of Forbidden Planet TV here on Christmas Day, and
Yeah.
reminiscing about comic Christmases past. I really enjoyed that, mate.
I mean, it's been great, Andrew. Thanks for giving me the chance to do it. And in fact, as always happens when we do these things, I remember things that I didn't know I did. So yeah, it's great. And I'm going to go and open a few Christmas annuals now and relive some of those magic days of years gone by.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to grab my holiday grab bags and a large mulled wine. And
You grab your holiday grab bags, mate.
Yeah, really... get hold of them grab bags.
Excellent. All the best, Andrew, and a very happy Christmas to you, and have a great New Year. And I hope to see you in the flesh.
The same to you, brother, and to everybody out there, from Dave and from myself. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Holidays, peace on earth, and goodwill to all. Take care of yourselves.
Absolutely. Goodbye, everybody. All the best.